Hi, this is Cindy from Vintage to New with another video tutorial. Today we're going to make my Anna top or a dress, and it's a little halter top or dress. I wanted to talk for just a minute about fabric. The fabric I chose is really lightweight. This works really well with the way that we're going to do the back with the elastic. Sometimes even quilt weight cotton is kind of heavy when you want elastic to gather it up. So this is a little cotton poly blend. The other nice thing about it is that it won't wrinkle and need to be ironed. So anyway, that's my tip on fabric selection. So to get started, we cut a bodice and a bodice lining, the skirt for the top, and the back piece and our straps. And if you want to make this into a dress, you'll also add a bottom ruffle. The first thing we're going to do is take our strap and we're going to fold it lengthwise, putting raw edges together, and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam down the side and then turn it right side out. This is making the straps for our top. Okay, we finished sewing the seams together. Now we're going to take a safety pin and we're going to attach the safety pin to the back only of this tube and do it down far enough that it's strong enough to hold the fabric as you pull it through. So I've gone down maybe 1/2 inch. You stick the safety pin down so it goes down the tube, and then you just start working it like this. And you just keep going until you get the safety pin out the other side and your tube will be turned right side out. I'll see you at the end. So I finished turning it right side out and I took it over and I worked it out so that it was nice and flat and gave it a quick little press. Okay, I have pinned on the neck strap here. I have left myself slightly over 1/2 inch here and 1/2 inch here because we're going to be sewing our underarm seam right here, and we do not want to get our necktie caught in that. Also, you'll notice that it's at an angle like this. So when it gets flipped right side out, you'll have that nice angle that wants to go up and tie behind the neck. Anyway, I wanted to show you too that I put my pins so that the top of the pin is sticking out up here. So when I take my bodice and put it over the top, I can pull those pins out when I sew. And I also neatly stack the rest of the tie here and pinned it so that I don't have any chance of it getting in the way when I'm sewing. And then you have to rip it out. So anyway, when I sew this right now, all I'm going to do, I'm going to sew up here, across the top, and down the other side. We're not going to sew the sides or the bottom. Okay, you can see that I have it sewn across the top and on just the top of the sides here. Our next step is we're going to trim off the top of the ties, and then on these corners we're going to trim them off so that we trim close to where we sewed but not clip any of those stitches. We're removing the bulk, so when we turn these corners right side out, we can get a really nice sharp turn in our corners. So then turn it right side out. Okay. And then use the tip of your scissors or a chopstick or something like that and gently work those corners out until they're nice and sharp. And it should look something like that. Now you can top stitch around the top, and that also reinforces this tie. So it's a good idea to go ahead and top stitch it this time. So here is what your bodice should look like now, and if you'll notice the ties want to lean in just a little bit like this because of the way that we laid them against the sides. And so now this is finished and we move on to attaching the skirt to it. Okay, I took a pin and I marked where the center front of the bodice is, and then I took another pin and I marked the center front of the skirt right here. Then I ran a 1/4 inch gathering stitch, a 1/4 inch from the top. I run a gathering stitch all along the top. So now I'm going to pull that gathering stitch and match the side seams to the side seams and use all these gathers in between, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, I have gathered the skirt and attached it to the bodice, putting right sides together. Notice that I have my pins sticking up this way, so when I put it in my sewing machine and I'm sewing across, I can take those pins out as I go along. I want to show you a couple tricks about sewing gathers, and so I'll show you what that looks like. I have it in my machine now, and I'm going to be sewing this on using a 3/8 inch seam. When you sew gathers, it's really important that you keep the gathers going nice and straight this way. So get your gathers set, hold it with your finger, and give a little tug with your left hand as you sew along. So get it set up, make sure that it's nice and even at the top. Give it a little tug to get those nice and straight, and then just keep sewing along. And it's really important that when you get to a pin, you pull it out. The reason is, if you don't pull that pin out, a lot of times you get a pucker, you know, a bunch of gathers all bunched up or something. So just keep working it the same. And because you had matched the center and the sides, your gathers should be pretty evenly distributed throughout the whole piece. Okay, so I attached the skirt like I showed you, and then I pulled out the gathering thread. It should be really easy to pull out. The way I use my gathering thread is just the longest stitch on a straight stitch. So I just pull it until it comes out. That way it's not always wanting to gather up more, cause trouble. So pull it out, and then I ran this through the serger. This seam here always gets really messy. So if you don't have a serger, trim it up so that it's nice and neat, and do a very nice zigzag stitch over the edge. Okay, so then the next step we're going to do is we're going to take and push that seam up. We're going to push it up, and then we're going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch up on the bottom of the bodice right here all the way across. So now you can see with the top stitching here, that pretty much completes the front of the bodice for right, or the front of the top for right now. So now we're going to move on to the back. So here's our back bodice, and I have folded it wrong sides together. I'm going to take it over to my machine, and I'm going to sew a 5/8 inch seam up from this this raw edge here. I'll show you what that looks like. If you look on the throat plate of your sewing machine, you'll notice that there are little marks, and on mine, this is the 5/8 inch line right here. So I'm going to sew with my fabric just running right along that 5/8 line, all the way from end to end. So here's my 5/8 line, 5/8 from this side here. So now what I need to do is to sew a 1/4 inch line over here, slightly larger than 1/4 inch, because I'm going to use 1/4 inch elastic, and I need to be able to get my elastic and safety pin through. What we're doing is forming a casing between the two lines that we're sewing in right now. I'll show you what it looks like. So you can see that I formed a nice little casing right here where eventually we're going to put in our elastic. But before we do the elastic, let's attach the back skirt to this. So what I'm going to do is run a gathering stitch along the top of my skirt, just like we did before, and line ends to ends up with this. I'm going to mark the middle of here and the middle of my skirt so that I can get it nice and even, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, here's my pin for the center of my skirt, and here's the pin for the center of the bodice back. I'm going to match those up and pin them in place, taking out that extra pin. Then I'm going to pull the gathering threads, and I'm going to gather it up so that it's nice and even from side to side, and then sew it on. Okay, we've cut our elastic to the size it says in the chart, put it on a safety pin, and we're going to start at one end and insert it into that casing that we made, and just wiggle it all along the top until you get it all worked in, and just make sure that you leave just a little bit out on this side. Okay, you can see that I've got it in and just a little bit is sticking out. I'm going to take it to my machine and give it a good little stitch down. Then I'm going to go over to the side where the safety pin is, and I'm going to do the same thing, being sure that I have pulled my safety pin way out of the way. and then you just clip off the safety pin like so. So here is what the bodice back looks like. All right, so now we're going to take and put right sides together of the bodice back and the bodice front. We're going to line up the top of the bodice back with the underarm right there, and it should line up at the hem also. And then we're going to sew 3/8 inch seam down the side seam. Okay, so here is what it looks like. When you sew the side seam, be sure to backstitch several times right here, because there's a lot of pull that's going to happen as you're putting it on and off on the top of this side seam. Finish off your side seam like we talked about, either serge or zigzag. And here is what the top looks like. So now if you were going to make a top, you would just do a hem at the bottom of this by turning it 1/4 inch and 1/4 inch and sewing a nice little hem. Now to finish off the ties, you need to measure it on the child and see where you want to cut your ties. You should not leave the ties really long. Just make them long enough to tie a little bow up at the neck and then trim them off. And then what I like to do to finish off the edge is to just do a nice little knot, do it nice and tight in the end, and then just trim that off. Okay, so when you trim these off, you just have it tied in a knot like that. Now if you're going to send this off to someone, you don't have the child right there with you, just instruct them to measure it on the child and then cut and do the same thing. Now if you wanted to make this into a dress, the next step is we add the ruffle to the bottom. Okay, we're starting to work on the ruffle. I have sewn them right sides together, so you'll end up with two side seams, okay? And I put the hem in the bottom. Now I'm going to mark the center front, the center back, and the 2 side seams are pretty obvious. I'm going to do the same here. I've got the 2 side seams which are obvious. I'm going to mark the center front and the center back of the little top. And then we're going to run the gathering stitch and pin it like we've done before, matching those pins so that our gathers are nice and even, and we're going to attach the ruffle. So here's what our little finished dress looks like. We attached the bottom ruffle, we finished the seam, turned it up, top stitched it like we've done all the other seams, and now your little dress is complete. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and until next time, this is Cindy with Vintage to New.